The Sky Over White Sands, New Mexico, July 1944. Dawn breaks over the desert as Lieutenant James Harrington wipes sweat from his brow despite the morning chill. His eyes are fixed on what the brass have dubbed the perfect weapon, a sleek, experimental missile that promises to turn the tide against Japan. The scorched testing grounds echo with the distant sounds of mechanics and scientists scrambling around the launch pad, their voices carried away by the desert wind. 3 minutes to launch sequence, crackles the announcement over the loudspeakers. Harrington's hands tremble slightly as he reviews the calculations one final time. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. 3 days without proper sleep, fueled by coffee and the crushing weight of responsibility. Across the compound, Dr. Eleanor Wright adjusts her protective goggles. Unlike the military personnel surrounding her, the physicist carries a different burden. Her equations, her design modifications, her fingerprints are all over this weapon. The bitter taste of conflict rises in her throat, creating destruction to end destruction. "You still think this is the right call?" asks Captain Miller, appearing beside her like a shadow. Before she can answer, a deafening alarm blares. The ground beneath them shudders. Something is wrong, terribly wrong. The missile's propulsion system glows an unnatural orange rather than the expected blue. "Abort! Abort!" Harrington screams into his radio, but it's already too late. As technicians scatter for cover, the morning desert sky erupts into a blinding flash that will forever divide their lives into before and after. In the devastating silence that follows, as debris rains down around them, no one yet understands that what they've witnessed isn't just a technical failure. It's the beginning of a story of betrayal that will test the limits of loyalty, conscience, and what these Americans are willing to sacrifice in the name of victory. 6 months earlier, Washington, D.C. had buzzed with urgency as the war in the Pacific intensified. In a wood-paneled conference room at the Pentagon, the newly formed Project Thunderbolt team gathered for the first time. Lieutenant Harrington, fresh from the Naval Academy with a reputation as a mathematical prodigy, found himself seated beside Dr. Eleanor Wright, a brilliant physicist whose contributions to ballistics had already saved countless American lives. "Gentlemen, and Dr. Wright," General Whitaker began, his voice gravelly from decades of command and cigarettes, "what we discuss in this room never leaves it. The Japanese have dug in across the Pacific. Every island costs us thousands of lives. We need a weapon that can end this without a full-scale invasion of the mainland." Eleanor's mind flashed back to Cambridge, 1938. Her professor placing a hand on her shoulder after reviewing her doctoral thesis on controlled propulsion systems. "This could change warfare forever," he had said, his voice tinged with both admiration and fear. "Be careful who gets their hands on this." At the time, she had laughed. Now, as blueprints for the perfect weapon spread across the table, that memory haunted her. Captain David Miller, a decorated Marine with haunted eyes and a scar running from temple to jaw, studied Eleanor with unconcealed skepticism. "With all due respect, sir, we're staking our strategy on untested theories from a," he hesitated, "civilian scientist?" Eleanor met his gaze. "My theories work on paper, Captain. They'll work in practice." What she didn't reveal was the night terrors that had plagued her since accepting this assignment. Dreams of cities engulfed in flame, children with melted skin. Progress demanded sacrifice, but at what cost? As winter turned to spring, the team relocated to the desolation of White Sands. The missile took shape, sleeker, more powerful, more precise than anything previously conceived. With each successful component test, the camaraderie between Eleanor and Harrington deepened. Both understood the language of physics in a way others didn't, their conversations flowing from equations to ethics and back again. One night, working late, Harrington confessed, "My brother died at Guadalcanal. Every day I wonder if this weapon might have saved him." Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted a calculation. "And I wonder how many brothers will take with this," she whispered. Neither noticed Captain Miller standing in the shadows of the doorway, listening. 3 weeks before the test launch, peculiar discrepancies began appearing in the guidance system calculations. Small errors, easily corrected, but troubling. Eleanor suspected sabotage but kept her concerns private, doubling her workload to verify every calculation personally. Meanwhile, Harrington received a classified folder from military intelligence. Inside, photographs of a suspected German scientist working with the Japanese on a similar weapon system. The face in those grainy photos struck him like a physical blow. Dr. Hans Weber, Eleanor's former professor and mentor from Cambridge. The night before the test, as a desert thunderstorm raged outside the barracks, Harrington confronted Eleanor with the file. "Did you know?" he demanded. Her face drained of color as she examined the photos. "It can't be," she whispered. "Hans disappeared in 1939. I thought the Nazis had killed him for refusing to work on their weapons program. Or he defected," Miller interjected, stepping into the room uninvited. "Just like you might be planning to do." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. "That's absurd," Eleanor replied, her voice ice-cold. "I've given everything to this project. Including sabotaged guidance calculations?" Miller pressed, producing a folder of his own. "Interesting how every would send the missile veering northwest, toward our own forces rather than the enemy's." Harrington stepped between them. "That's enough, Miller. Dr. Wright has my complete confidence." The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating their faces in stark, momentary flashes as the three stood locked in a triangle of suspicion and doubt. By dawn, they had reached an uneasy truce. The test would proceed as scheduled. But as they walked together toward the launch site, each carried a different weight. Harrington, his wavering trust; Eleanor, her wounded integrity; Miller, his hand resting a little too casually near his sidearm. "Hey folks, I'd love to know where you're watching this video from. Drop your location in the comments below and let's see how far this historical story has reached." The aftermath of the explosion transformed the White Sands facility into a landscape of chaos and accusation. 3 technicians dead, 17 injured, and millions in equipment reduced to twisted metal. Armed MPs established a perimeter around the blast zone while medical personnel rushed the wounded to field hospitals. Through the smoke and confusion, Captain Miller's voice cut like a blade. "Arrest Dr. Wright," he ordered, drawing his sidearm. This was sabotage, plain and simple. Harrington stepped between them. "On what grounds, Captain?" This could have been any number of technical failures. Her calculations were perfect on paper but deadly in practice, Miller snarled. Just like her mentor taught her. Eleanor stood motionless, ash settling on her shoulders like premature snow. "I didn't do this," she said, her voice barely audible above the emergency sirens. "But I know what happened." Before she could elaborate, General Whitaker arrived, his staff car kicking up dust as it skidded to a halt. "No one's arresting anyone," he barked. "Not until we know exactly what happened. Secure the site, quarantine all documentation, and establish a communications blackout. Nothing leaves this base." In the makeshift investigation room, formerly the mess hall, teams of engineers and military analysts pored over salvaged components and testing logs. Eleanor worked in isolation, separated from the others by Miller's insistence. Harrington moved between groups, his mathematical mind searching for patterns in the chaos. On the 3rd day, as afternoon heat shimmered over the desert, Eleanor requested a private meeting with Harrington and Whitaker. Miller insisted on attending. In the general's office, she laid out her findings with clinical precision. "The missile didn't explode because of sabotage to my guidance system," she explained, spreading diagrams across Whitaker's desk. "It exploded because someone replaced the experimental fuel mixture with an unstable alternative. The chemical signature is unmistakable. It's a German formula." Miller scoffed. "Convenient to blame phantom Germans." "Not phantoms," Eleanor countered, sliding a photograph across the desk, a surveillance image of a maintenance worker captured 3 nights before the test. "This man doesn't exist in any personnel file, but I recognize him from Cambridge. He worked in Hans Weber's laboratory." The revelation unleashed a hurricane of counterintelligence activity. The mysterious worker had vanished, but his fingerprints matched those found in Eleanor's office, where calculations had been subtly altered. More disturbingly, similar prints appeared on Miller's classified files. That evening, Harrington discovered Miller's quarters empty, personal items gone. Military police found his car abandoned 50 miles south, near the Mexican border. He was their man all along, Whitaker concluded in an emergency briefing. Using Dr. Wright as the perfect scapegoat if anything went wrong. Eleanor's vindication felt hollow as she gazed at the missile's wreckage. Weber is building something similar for the Japanese. That's why they wanted our project delayed or destroyed, to win the race. Harrington studied her face in the harsh desert sunlight. You knew Weber better than anyone. Where would he establish his laboratory? What would he need? This question transformed Eleanor from suspect to their most valuable asset. Within hours, she and Harrington were sequestered with intelligence officers, constructing a detailed profile of Weber's methods, his technical requirements, his psychological patterns. He needs 3 things, Eleanor explained. Isolation for security, proximity to manufacturing for components, and a coastal location for eventual deployment. Her finger traced possibilities along maps of Japanese-controlled territory. And he has a weakness, she added quietly. He becomes so focused on theoretical perfection that he sometimes misses practical vulnerabilities. Harrington recognized the strategy forming in her mind. You want to let him complete his weapon? She nodded. With one critical flaw that we can exploit. The plan crystallized. Allow Weber to think he had succeeded, use Eleanor's intimate knowledge of both the weapon and its creator to introduce a fatal weakness, and turn the perfect weapon into the perfect trap. But it required something extraordinary. Eleanor herself would need to appear to defect, to seemingly confirm Miller's accusations. They'll believe I've turned, she said, meeting Harrington's gaze. Weber will believe it because he always thought his students would follow his path. And the Japanese will believe it because Miller will have told them I'm sympathetic. It's suicide, Harrington protested. If anything goes wrong, then millions of our boys don't come home, she finished. This is the only way. That night, under the vast desert stars, Harrington and Eleanor sat in silence on the hood of a jeep, contemplating what lay ahead. Their hands found each other's, fingers intertwining in the darkness. When this is over, he began. She squeezed his hand. Let's survive first. Before dawn, Eleanor Wright disappeared from White Sands. Official reports listed her as a traitor, a German sympathizer who had sabotaged an American weapons program before fleeing to enemy territory. Only 3 people knew the truth, Harrington, Whitaker, and Eleanor herself, as she embarked on the most dangerous mission of the war, carrying the fate of thousands in her brilliant, burdened mind. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying this dramatic historical tale, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. Now, back to our story of betrayal and redemption in the final stages of World War II. For months later, a small fishing vessel cut through fog-shrouded waters off the coast of Hokkaido. Aboard, Eleanor, now known as Anna Schmidt, a Swiss physicist sympathetic to the Axis powers, stood beside Hans Weber. The years had not been kind to her former mentor. His once robust frame had withered, but his eyes retained their unsettling intensity as they approached the secret island installation. You understand why I had to do it this way, Weber said in German, his breath visible in the cold air. The Americans would have used our creation to slaughter civilians. Eleanor nodded, maintaining her carefully constructed persona. Science should serve humanity, not destroy it. Weber smiled, placing a paternal hand on her shoulder. I always knew you would come to understand. Together, we will force the Americans to negotiate peace instead of demanding unconditional surrender. The facility rose from the rocky shoreline like a fortress, a concrete bunker complex disguised as a fishing village. Inside, Eleanor found herself in a surreal mirror image of White Sands. The same equipment, similar designs, even the same brand of coffee in the scientists' quarters. The Japanese engineers treated her with reserved respect, while the German scientists embraced her as one of their own. For 10 weeks, she worked alongside Weber, subtly introducing her planned flaw into the weapon's detonation sequence, a modification that would appear to enhance efficiency while actually ensuring catastrophic failure. Each night, she transmitted encrypted data via a miniature radio concealed in her hairbrush, sending crucial intelligence to Harrington's team now stationed in the Philippines. Meanwhile, Harrington led a combined task force of intelligence officers and combat engineers, preparing for what the brass had codenamed Operation Checkmate. Their mission, to ensure that Weber's weapon never reached its target, an American naval staging area preparing for the invasion of Japan. Satellite reconnaissance and Eleanor's intelligence confirmed that a test launch was imminent. 2 days before the scheduled test, Eleanor's cover nearly collapsed. While adjusting calculations in the control room, she encountered a familiar face, Captain Miller, now wearing a German officer's uniform. Their eyes met in mutual recognition and shock. "I thought you'd be dead by now," Miller said quietly, ensuring no one else could hear. "I'm more valuable alive," Eleanor replied, maintaining her composure while her heart hammered against her ribs. "But I'm surprised they trust you after your failure in New Mexico." Miller's hand drifted toward his holstered pistol. "I've redeemed myself. But I wonder how you convinced Weber of your sincerity." "Perhaps for the same reason he trusts you," she countered. "We tell him what he wants to hear." Their standoff was interrupted by alarms. American aircraft had been detected approaching the island. The test was immediately pushed forward, throwing the facility into frantic activity. In the chaos, Miller disappeared, but Eleanor knew he would be watching her every move. Dawn broke clear and cold on the day of the launch. Weber stood proudly beside his creation, a missile twice as powerful as the White Sands prototype. Japanese military officials and Nazi observers gathered on a viewing platform while Eleanor took her position at the guidance controls. "Today, we changed the course of history," Weber announced. "The Americans will learn that technological superiority is still ours." As the countdown commenced, Eleanor's fingers flew across the control panel, making final adjustments that appeared routine but were actually activating her sabotage protocol. Across the Sea of Japan, Harrington's team monitored the situation, ready to intercept if her plan failed. At 30 seconds to launch, Miller reappeared beside Eleanor, drawing his pistol beneath the control console. "Your hand is trembling, Dr. Wright," he whispered. "Having second thoughts about betraying your new friends?" "The only traitor here is you," she replied without looking up. "I serve the winning side," he hissed. "And I'm not going to let you sabotage this launch." 10 seconds remained. Miller's gun pressed against her ribs. In the chaos of the countdown, no one noticed their struggle as Eleanor's elbow struck Miller's wrist, sending the pistol clattering to the floor. He lunged for her throat just as Weber turned to witness the confrontation. "She's an American spy," Miller shouted, but his words were drowned out by the roar of ignition. The missile rose majestically from its platform, cutting through the morning sky in a perfect arc. Weber watched in triumph, oblivious to the struggle behind him. Eleanor broke free from Miller's grasp just as the weapon reached 5,000 feet. Then, exactly as she had planned, the missile shuddered mid-flight. Its trajectory faltered. Instead of continuing toward the American fleet, it curved back in a wide arc, heading directly for the launch facility. "Impossible!" Weber cried, his moment of glory transforming into horror. Pandemonium erupted on the viewing platform. Japanese officers shouted evacuation orders while Weber stood transfixed, watching his creation become his destruction. Eleanor seized the moment of confusion to break away from Miller, racing toward the communications building where she could transmit final coordinates to Harrington's team. She never made it. Miller tackled her at the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "You've killed us all. Only those who chose the wrong side of history," she gasped. Above them, the missile began its terminal descent, its guidance system locked on the launch facility's heat signature, exactly as Eleanor had programmed. Weber finally broke from his trance, running toward them with understanding dawning on his aged face. "Eleanor, what have you done?" he cried. The sky erupted into blinding light. The blast wave hit seconds later, shattering concrete and glass, throwing bodies like rag dolls. Eleanor felt herself lifted and hurled through space, her consciousness flickering as debris rained down around her. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was of Harrington, waiting across the sea, and whether he would ever know if she had succeeded. 6 weeks later, at a military hospital in Oahu, Eleanor opened her eyes to find Harrington dozing in a chair beside her bed, his uniform rumpled, his face unshaven. Bandages covered the left side of her body, testament to her miraculous survival amid the destruction of Weber's facility. "Lieutenant," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. Harrington startled awake, his exhaustion instantly replaced by relief. "Welcome back, Doctor. You've been unconscious for nearly a month." "The mission?" she asked, wincing as she attempted to sit up. "Completely successful. The entire facility destroyed, Weber's research obliterated, and Japanese high command is now convinced that the technology is fundamentally flawed." His expression softened. "But we almost lost you in the process." Eleanor's memories returned in fragments, the explosion being thrown into a drainage culvert that partially shielded her from the blast, a Japanese fisherman finding her half dead on the shore, and finally, American forces arriving during their sweep of the area. But one face dominated her recollections. "Miller? Dead?" Harrington confirmed. "Along with Weber and most of the research team. You were the only survivor from the control room." The news should have brought relief, but Eleanor felt only a hollow emptiness. So many lives lost, some innocent, some complicit, all human. She turned her face toward the window, where tropical sunlight streamed in, so different from the cold Hokkaido morning of the launch. "It wasn't supposed to end with so much death," she murmured. Harrington took her hand gently. "But it ended with far less than if Weber had succeeded. Intelligence estimates his weapon could have killed thousands of our sailors and Marines. You saved them all." Recovery came slowly. As Eleanor's body healed, she struggled with deeper wounds. Nightmares plagued her, Weber's face in the moment of betrayal, Miller's final accusation, the flash that had consumed them all. During daylight hours, military intelligence officers debriefed her exhaustively, extracting every detail of Weber's research to ensure nothing could be reconstructed. 3 months after the Hokkaido incident, as autumn painted Washington, D.C. in gold and crimson, Eleanor found herself seated in the Oval Office. President Truman regarded her with somber appreciation. "Dr. Wright, your country owes you a debt it can never properly repay," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "This contains documentation of your official record, amended to remove all suggestions of treason or defection. Your reputation has been fully restored." "Thank you, Mr. President," she replied, leaving the folder untouched. "But what about the weapon itself? Weber's research?" "What?" Truman's expression darkened. "That chapter is closed, Doctor. With the Japanese surrender, there's no need for such weapons." But Eleanor knew better. She had seen the classified reports, American scientists working on projects far more devastating than anything she or Weber had conceived. The atomic tests in New Mexico had succeeded where her conventional missile had failed. "We've opened Pandora's box," she said quietly. "These weapons won't disappear because the war is over." The president didn't disagree. "Which is why we need minds like yours focused on the peace, not the next war. I'm establishing a new civilian commission on scientific ethics. I want you to lead it." Outside the White House, Harrington waited, now wearing the oak leaves of a newly promoted major. Together they walked through Lafayette Park, their breath visible in the crisp November air. "Have you decided what you'll do?" he asked. Eleanor considered the path that had brought her here, from theoretical physics to weapons designed to espionage and now to an uncertain future in a world forever changed by the science she had helped advance. "I can't go back to pure research," she admitted. "Not after seeing what our equations become when militarized. But I can't walk away from science either." "So you'll take Truman's offer?" "Someone needs to stand at the intersection of science and conscience. To ask the questions no one wants to answer before the next perfect weapon is built." They stopped beneath a maple tree, its last leaves clinging stubbornly to skeletal branches. Harrington turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I received new orders this morning," he said. "Pentagon assignment, scientific liaison to the Army's research division." Eleanor understood the implication. Their paths would continue to cross, professionally at first, but with the possibility of more. "We'll be keeping an eye on each other," she observed with the first genuine smile since before the explosion. In the years that followed, as Cold War tensions replaced World War conflicts, Eleanor and Harrington became the unlikeliest of partnerships. She, the ethical conscience of America's scientific community. He, the military man who understood that security required both strength and restraint. Their relationship deepened from professional respect to friendship and eventually to love, formalized in a small ceremony attended by General Whitaker, now chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But the shadow of Hokkaido never fully lifted. On the anniversary of the explosion each year, Eleanor would place flowers beneath a cherry tree they had planted in their Georgetown garden, remembrance for Weber, for Miller, for all those consumed by the terrible logic of weapons development. In 1955, when the Soviets announced their first successful hydrogen bomb test, Eleanor received a handwritten note from President Eisenhower. "Your commission's recommendations were right. I wish we had listened sooner." That evening, she found Harrington in his study, examining satellite photographs of Soviet missile installations. "We're doing it all over again," she said, placing the president's note before him. "Building bigger, more perfect weapons." Harrington sighed, removing his reading glasses. "The difference is that now there are people like you at the table. People who understand both the science and its consequences. People who remember Hokkaido. Is it enough?" she asked. He had no answer, but drew her close, both of them contemplating the delicate balance between knowledge and wisdom that would define the nuclear age, a balance they had helped establish through sacrifice, deception, and ultimately truth. Later that year, Eleanor addressed the graduating class at MIT, her alma mater. Looking out at the fresh young faces, brilliant minds poised to push the boundaries of human understanding, she delivered words that would become her lasting legacy. "Science gives us power over nature, but wisdom gives us power over ourselves. The most perfect weapon ever created is not built of steel and explosives, but of the courage to ask, not what we can do, but what we should do. Remember this when they ask you to build the impossible. The most important equation is the one that calculates the human cost." The story of the perfect weapon didn't end with Eleanor and Harrington. Their legacy lived on through generations of scientists and military strategists who found themselves facing similar moral crucibles. The ethical framework Eleanor established became the foundation for international weapons treaties, while Harrington's military reforms transformed how America balanced innovation with restraint. In the last interview before her death in 1987, Eleanor was asked if she regretted her role in developing weapons technology. Her answer was characteristically thoughtful. "I regret that such weapons were necessary. But I don't regret standing at that intersection of knowledge and responsibility. Someone had to witness both the creation and the destruction to tell the story honestly." The explosion at White Sands and the sabotage at Hokkaido never appeared in official military histories. Yet their impact rippled through decades of American policy, invisible but profound, like radiation that changes everything it touches. In times of moral ambiguity, when technology outpaces ethics, we would do well to remember Eleanor Wright and James Harrington, two people who discovered that the most powerful weapon is neither missile nor bomb, but the human capacity to choose compassion over convenience, truth over expedience, and life over destruction. Their story reminds us that even in our darkest hours, when victory seems to demand our humanity as its price, we can find another way forward, one that preserves both peace and our conscience. If this exploration of moral courage in wartime resonated with you, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the hidden stories that shaped our world. Leave a comment with your thoughts on how scientific ethics should be handled in times of conflict. And don't forget to check out our playlist on Unsung Heroes of World War II for more incredible tales of bravery and sacrifice. Until next time, remember that history's greatest lessons often come from its most classified pages.